The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. In Parliament today, MPs questioned the government on SkillsFuture policies and the introduction of autonomous vehicles. Lawmakers pressed on the SkillsFuture Level Up program, questioning the age cutoff for mid-career support, while autonomous vehicles sparked debate over job security, safety, and the potential for AVs to fill gaps in public transport, such as late-night routes. Also in Parliament today, we continue the debate on the president's address, with several maiden speeches and key policy themes taking center stage. First-term MP Lisa Chen spoke about caregivers and maternal health, describing them as the quiet pillars of society, while Education Minister Desmond Lee outlined a refreshed social policy and major shifts in education. The call for building a we-first society also emerged as a strong thread, with new proposals on social cohesion, competitiveness, and values. So joining us today to unpack all of this is Malminderjit Singh, who's the founder and director of Terra Corporate Affairs. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hello, hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, Malminderjit, barely 20 PQs were cleared today, according to Speaker Seah Kian Peng, when he marked the end of question time at around 1 p.m. today. What is the signal about the breadth of concerns MPs are seeking to raise in this new parliament?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting number, because one of the things that we often see is that, PQs around a similar topic are usually grouped together and answered, and the fact that we only got through about 20 such themes or topics together meant that MPs are not just asking more questions, but also asking more about each topic and each question. So I guess the complexity of different issues that we are seeing today, whether it's transportation, it's jobs and skills, or about society in general, is getting broader, and therefore the breadth of questioning has definitely increased as well.
Right. Well, we kicked off the session with the topic around SkillsFuture. It looks like MPs have filed several questions on various programs that give those above 40 more funds to reskill. Now, among those questions, several MPs have asked about the age cutoff of 40 for the mid-career training allowance under the SkillsFuture Level Up scheme. What does anchoring the scheme at 40 tell us about, how the government views mid-career vulnerability?
Yeah, well, those guys who are 40 and above would have probably, graduated from university, their undergraduate degree, about 15 years ago or longer. So I guess in that sense, their skills probably need, a bit more replenishing and trying to rejuvenate those skill sets. I guess, if there's a greater sense of skills getting outdated, then they are probably at higher risk than younger ones, since they have not had true skills training or added to their skill set for a long time. But also, I think on the other point of view, from an economic point and the job market point of view, many of the guys who are in the 40s and above would probably be in the mid-career sort of stage. And, the way we're looking at job cuts more recently across the board, those guys probably are at higher risk of losing jobs as well than, say, fresh joiners or people who are much more senior. And, those guys then probably need a better push in terms of replenishing their skill sets. And again, those very same group of people probably also find it more difficult to get back into the workforce once they lose their job. So I guess the focus now is really on this group of people to replenish their skill set as soon as possible.
I mean, the question was about the age cutoff of 40. So could more Singaporeans actually benefit from the SkillsFuture scheme if we include the 30 to 39 age group? Do you think they will, need it more as well? I mean, what are the implications, though?
Well, definitely expanding the scheme to include a wider age group benefits more people just from a numbers point of view, but it's also a question of effectiveness, whether that is the current target group that you need to target right now with that scheme, or there may be other schemes, that will be more useful for those guys. So, the way I look at it now, I think this 40 and above age group is the one that's more critical right now for the reasons I mentioned earlier.
Okay. Well, other than that, MPs also pressed for training allowances to cover postgraduate programs, which the government has resisted to avoid perpetuating a so-called paper chase. Could the decision to exclude postgraduate programs from training allowances, unintentionally limit opportunities for workers aiming to upskill in specialized or emerging sectors, though?
I don't think so, because not many of the new skill sets, like AI, for example, if someone is going to be trained to be an AI programmer or data analyst, for instance, I don't think you need a postgraduate degree program to do that. You need to acquire new new skills, a new certification, a diploma perhaps. There may be some fields where a postgraduate degree is important to upgrade your skills or to move up the career ladder. But I don't think you need, support on that front right now. I think what they did mention today, if I'm not wrong, the SMS, Dr. Gerald Puducherry did mention in Parliament as well that they are currently reviewing that to see which sectors and segments do require postgraduate support. I suppose a more surgical approach will be preferable.
Well, moving away from SkillsFuture now, the Parliament also debated the impact of autonomous vehicles with Senior Minister of State for Transport, Ms. Sun Suiling, assuring that taxi and private hire drivers will not be displaced in the short term. So does this approach help ease anxiety among drivers in the long term, or is it mainly a short-term reassurance?
Well, I guess there is definitely going to be a long-term anxiety amongst drivers and, workers in the transportation industry as to whether their jobs are at risk. And a lot of it depends on how quickly and how much they're willing to upskill and move away from their current roles to, working around the autonomous vehicles sector. But of course, the way I look at it, the AVs also be gradually rolled in. It's not going to be a direct hit, so it's a phased approach. So yes, it may not be a short-term hit, but in the long term, I think, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on how fast and how willing they are to upskill.
Definitely. Well, at the same time, the ministry is exploring whether AVs could be deployed on less popular routes, including late-night services like the discounted night rider buses, where driver shortages have been an issue. So by targeting less popular or late-night routes, are AVs likely to create new inequities in service?
Well, I guess if there is currently those routes are not being serviced by the current providers, then the AV does fill that gap. But, there's still from the user point of view, there's still a general hesitation and concern about AVs as well. So I'm not sure, and the proof will be in the pudding, right, whether there's a take-up or not. So it's hard to say for now whether there'll be inequities or not. I think there still remains to be seen. But I guess, it does plug the gap from a market gap that currently exists.
Well, we also resumed the debate on the president's address. First-term MP Elisa Chen, she devoted her maiden speech to caregivers and maternal health, and she spoke about the challenges of motherhood, describing caregivers as the quiet pillars of society who hold up our families. And among her proposals were closing the post-18 cliff faced by, families with special needs children, building a national caregiver hub to better coordinate services, and making maternal health checkups a routine part of infant care. What does the post-18 cliff reveal about the, gaps in long-term support for families with special needs children?
Yeah, well, so it's quite well documented actually that, once a child with special needs or difficult learning difficulties or physical difficulties leaves the traditional and formal schooling system post-18, there's a gap. Where does the person end up? What happens to the person? So quite often the emphasis has been especially for those who can make the transition to the workforce, the emphasis has been on preparing them for the workforce. But therein lies also the challenge that, how do we suggest, since everyone's on the spectrum, how do we suggest and how do we put a point to it? Where is that point that of readiness, right? Because different people will have different points of readiness. So how do we indicate that? How do we figure that out? Second point is, do we really want to force them also to be ready just so that they can be taken care of and they don't fall off the grid? Can there be more done for those who need longer time to transition into the workforce, if at all? Or maybe some may not even be ready for the workforce. How do they get the right support or adequate attention? For those who are in the limbo or in transition, some often turn to daycare centers, and I also understand that, daycare centers are the inadequate supply currently. So, there's a long waiting time as well. So all kinds of different challenges come in, and not to mention the challenges faced by caregivers in the interim.
So is a national caregiver hub sufficient enough, or should other reforms be considered to really ease the burden on families?
Well, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I think having drawing greater attention to caregivers and, providing support system for them. And I think MOS Dinesh Vasudesh also mentioned in his speech earlier this week as well about, his pilot of a caregiver hub in his constituency as well. So I think that's definitely a step in the right direction, but certainly more can be done, especially I think with employability in the workforce. Caregivers often have trouble, to take a gap year out or two, to take time out from work. Going back, transitioning back to the workforce, all while being a caregiver while still working. Do employers afford that kind of consideration to them, and is there a certain amount of flexibility given to them on that front? I don't think, we're right there yet, compared to many other societies around the world. So I think there's still, much work to be done on that front.
Well, Education Minister Desmond Lee also joined the debate and has outlined two key shifts as well. A refreshed approach in tackling difficult social issues and a transformation of the education system. Now, starting with the social policy, Mr. Lee, he pointed to Comlink Plus as a way to provide a wraparound support to uplift families in areas of home ownership, education, and employment. So what does this wraparound support mean in the long term? Can it really reduce, inequality and improve social mobility, or is it primarily a short-term intervention?
I think it's definitely something for the long term. I mean, the way issues are today, the way society is today, due to the complexities of society and issues, I think it's quite well documented, even here in Singapore, that, not one single party has all the solutions, all the answers. And certainly the government doesn't have it as well. So I think a multi-partner or multi-pronged approach is something that we need to aspire towards and start building a culture of, right? So it's civil society, families, communities, and also, the government itself, doing more than what it really does. So I think definitely it's something longer term that will help solve some of the problems we're currently seeing.
Well, he added that there is also a risk of an opportunity gap where families with more resources gain an advantage while lower income students will face an uphill battle. How well positioned is the government, to close the opportunity gap through school resources and community partnerships as well? I mean, what obstacles might limit the effectiveness of such interventions?
Yeah, so I think there is definitely, an opportunity to do that through schools. But again, and I think Minister Desmond Lee also alluded to this in his speech today as well, that we haven't quite moved away from education as being an arms race. So, what the biggest impediment for this is that we need a cultural change, we need a mindset change to how we view education and how we view, just being a competitive society as a whole. Right. So, the last thing you want is for government to put in more resources in schools to uplift those who have less through some of these partnerships and resources. But, then those who have more, just putting in more and upping the ante, and it's not surprising to say that, you might see, a lot of other businesses or educational institutes, just private ones, spring up to say, look, we're going to give you a lift up or leg up more in society or in your system. So I think that kind of mindset is not going to help. So we're just going to keep raising the bar if that keeps happening. So it requires a mindset shift of society as a whole.
Well, building a we-first society has also been a key theme in the debate of the president's address. Now, Dr. Syed Harun from Nisun GRC in his maiden speech today offered a three-pronged approach for Singapore. Now, that involves efforts to boost social cohesion, burnish economic competitiveness, and become a cornerstone of a caring and values-driven society. How would you define a we-first society, Malminderjit? I mean, how effective as well do you think Dr. Syed Harun's approach would be?
Yeah, so I think Dr. Syed Harun, hit the nail right on his head. If you look at it today, the two biggest trends or two biggest pillars of society under threat: multiculturalism and multilateralism, right, throughout the world. And that means that people are starting to think more of themselves, I, rather than we, collective. So for me, a we-first society is about being a collective, right? And that means uplifting one another, thinking about one another, but also, looking at issues collectively as a society. So I think he mentioned in his speech about how even their differences, we collectively resolve them. We could agree to disagree, but then find solutions together. I think that's a very important point. We have seen here and many other parts of the world where those become very sticky points and divide society further. So we need to find ways to unite society rather than divide it. And I think what's interesting for me is that, Dr. Harun's 3 points focused on the two main threads. One is the existential and one is aspirational. And the existential part where he talks about, bolstering the economy, I think that's bread and butter issues, right? Jobs and economy. And that has always been a pillar of the Singapore society, the Singapore's social compact, if you like. And that still remains till today. But at the same time, we also need to focus more on aspirational issues about building a stronger and more cohesive society. So I like very much what he said.
All right. Well, before we let you go here, are there any other highlights from today's Parliament session that caught your attention as well?
Well, there is one I thought that was quite interesting, and that's, I think, Ms. Yeo Wan Ling. She spoke about the plight of bus drivers. And I thought that was very revealing. And that's, of course, drawing from her role as a union leader, working with transport workers as well. And I thought that was quite interesting where she spoke about how bus drivers have a very short, lunch break and their welfare really in general. And also how more could be done to quell their anxieties and their long-term future and sustainability, given the many different advancements and differences we are seeing in the transport sector today, whether it's the AVs, as you mentioned, or, whether it's just more cross-border transportation and stuff like that. So I think thought that was interesting. Certainly, shown in terms of looking at a vulnerable segment of society, and I think, it creates a lot of empathy for this group of people.
Right. Some great analysis from you there. Thank you so much, Malminderjit, for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Thank you. That was Malminderjit Singh, founder and director of Terra Corporate Affairs. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.